Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. And for those who are very familiar with the series, welcome back. Before I get started, I just want to say that I hope that wherever you are, I hope that you're staying safe and that you are looking after yourselves as all of this craziness unfolds in the world. Aside from the real world stuff, pretty much my week has been business as usual with work and reading, and I kicked my reading slump to the curb. I read 7 books this week. So this is my reading week from the 8th until the 14th of March. As I said, I read 7 books. 5 of those were adult books, 2 were young adults. 4 were physical books, 3 were ebooks. I read a total of 3,015 pages and my yearly reading total is up to 78 books. The first book that I read this week was House of Earth and Blood, which is book 1 in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. Obviously this is a very hyped book here on BookTube. It is a 2020 release from Bloomsbury. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was a fun read. There are things that I had some issues with, but for those of you who have not heard anything about the book, which at this point I would be surprised if you haven't because Sarah J. Maas is just everywhere. Our main character in House of Earth and Blood is Bryce. She is an antiquities assistant and we begin the book 2 years in the past, and at this point in time Bryce is pretty much an unrepentant party girl. There is drug use and a lot of talk about alcohol in the book, so beware of that going in if those are triggers for you. And at the very start of the book, she loses someone very close to her while she's out getting high on drugs. And then we flash forward to 2 years later and we find out that she is not coping particularly well. And this is an urban fantasy book, but it's urban fantasy in that the world itself is fantasy, but there are Earth-like elements in it, which I'll admit is not my favorite version of urban fantasy. I prefer Earth-based with magic rather than fantasy-based with human Earth stuff, because it actually draws me out of the story when I go, but hang on, why do they have that? So when we flash forward to 2 years later, Bryce finds herself being recruited to help in the investigation when murders that matched the murder that happened 2 years prior begin to reappear. And she is partnered with fallen angel Hunt, and the two have to sort of solve the mysteries. And in doing so, that will also earn Hunt's freedom. And there's a whole lot of stuff that makes up this world. And honestly, I think to talk about much of it is to give away spoilers. But in this fantasy world, you have fae, you have vampires, you have angels, you have magical humans, and then you have regular run-of-the-mill humans. I mean, this is the first book in a series, and so there's a lot of world building. And in fact, probably one of my biggest criticisms of this book is that the same elements of world building are repeated over and over for the first 300 pages. And I really struggled with that. I think it probably could have been 200 pages shorter. But that said, there were things in it that I really liked. I liked the mystery that once it ramped up and once the stakes got high enough, I really wanted to know what was going on. I liked the angels and I liked the power dynamic and power structure of the angels as well. That was really interesting. I sort of wish we'd spent more time with that. We spent a little bit of time with the fae element, and that would have also been nicer to see that developed a little bit more, but I have suspicions about the subsequent books. This is called House of Earth and Blood, which is one of the groups of individuals that exist in this world. And then you have 4 other houses. There's a House of Sky and Breath, House of Many Waters, and House of Flame and Shadow. And I'm assuming that subsequent books will be named after those houses and will follow characters that are part of those houses. And like, I have suspicions about who will be the main characters if that is what Sarah J. Maas is doing with her book series. And that'll be really cool. So yes, I enjoyed this, but I do have conflicting feelings about it. Will I continue the series? Of course I will, because I'm trash for Sarah J. Maas and I like urban fantasy even when it's not my favourite brand of urban fantasy. What can I say? I'm a complicated reader. The next 3 books that I read are all part of the same series. It is the Hard Play series by Nalini Singh. The first book is Cherish Hard. It was published in 2017 by TKA Distribution. Oh, that was a mouthful. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I did read it for Kirsty's challenge, which I did talk about last week in my wrap up. This was for green on the cover because I'm pretty sure Nalini Singh's name is green on the cover of this one, so we'll go with it. In this book, we follow Sailor Bishop, who is a young man in his early 20s, I'm pretty sure. And he has one dream and one goal in life. He wants to establish his landscape gardening business and he wants to expand it. He's had this dream his whole life and he has started to make it a reality. What he doesn't expect is to come across Isa Rain, who I think it's Isa Rain, who is a local teacher, but she's also the daughter of a very prominent businesswoman in New Zealand. They have a chance encounter and then he can't get her out of his mind and neither can she. It's an age gap romance. Isa is a little bit older and she really wants to settle down. She has decided that she wants to find someone that she can marry and have children with and build a life with, and can't see past the fact that maybe the immediate attraction she has to Sailor is more than anything than just a fling. So this was really fun, very easy to read. It's like a great afternoon on the couch sort of read. And Nalini Singh is great at developing romantic relationships, so I did really enjoy this book. Book 2 is Rebel Hard. This was published in 2018 on Kindle. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. I think I gave the entire series 4 out of 5 stars. I read this for Kirsty's challenge to read a book with yellow on the cover. So all of these books are intertwined because all of the characters know each other, but this one shifts away from Sailor's family and now focuses on one of the friends that they're sort of in contact with. And in this one, we follow Naina Sharma, who is, I think, in her mid to late 20s. She is the youngest daughter and the good girl of her family, and her family is of Indian descent. I can't remember exactly. I think it's Indian. After her sister runs away and gets married without consulting her family, she's sort of cast out, and Naina has to be the good girl to sort of help her parents save face. And so she agrees to an arranged marriage, and her parents begin setting up meetings with all the local eligible gentlemen, and she can't stand any of them. And so after many of these meetings where she's starting to feel disheartened that she's never going to find someone, she decides to go out to a party with one of her friends. And while she's there, she decides to live a little, and she ends up making out with this mysterious guy. We find out as a reader that the man that she makes out is Raj Sen. The next time that Naina crosses paths with him, it's when their parents are introducing them as a potential marriage arrangement. And it is just delightful and funny. And Raj is the complete opposite of Naina, who is quite free-spirited and really wants to live and see the world, whereas Raj is more traditional minded and wants to settle down. And he really does believe in his family's traditions. The two end up having to sort of try and find a compromise because they're both very attracted to one another, but they know that they're coming from very different places. And Raj challenges Naina to see if they can make what they have work. And this was just delightfully fun, and it was nice to have another story set in New Zealand but following a different cultural group, and it was just great. I really enjoyed it. Book 3 was Love Hard, which is a 2020 release from TKA Distribution. I received this as a NetGalley arc. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. We return to Sailor's family, or the Bishop family, and we follow his younger brother Jacob, who is a up-and-coming, very popular rugby star. Jacob has a 5-year-old daughter, and we find out that when he was in his teens, he and his girlfriend had an unplanned pregnancy, and I think they were like 16 or 17, and then very unexpectedly his girlfriend passed away after their daughter was born. And so Jacob and his family were left raising his young daughter, and she is amazing. She's a great character. Being left with so much responsibility at a very young age, Jacob sort of grew into a very serious sort of young guy in his early 20s who is very protective of his family. He has had to learn not to wrap his daughter up in cotton wool and let her live and experience life. The last thing that he wants is to start a relationship with someone who can't respect that or is going to bring too much attention to his daughter. All of that sort of goes out the window when he crosses paths with someone he knew from high school, his deceased girlfriend's best friend, Juliet, and the two of them sort of clash, but they also begin to realize that they have an attraction. But Juliet comes with her own set of baggage. She is just recently divorced from her husband, who is a prominent cricket player, and the tabloids keep dragging her name through the mud. Jacob doesn't know whether he wants to bring that into his life. And so the two have to decide, can they make it work? Is it worth it? And where are they willing to compromise? So again, this was a really great one as well. Just a lot of really fun reading. Then I read The Vanishing Deep by Astrid Schultz. This was a review copy sent to me by Alan Unwin. It is a 2020 release from Alan Unwin, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I read it for Kirsty's challenge to read a book with blue on the cover. This is Astrid Schultz's sophomore book. Honestly, it wasn't my favorite. It's kind of like a young adult dystopian set on a world that's not Earth, or at least I don't think it is. And at one point it was like Earth, and then the sea levels rose and the entire world basically drowned, and the people who survived had to set up cities that float on water or sit on the water's surface. Our main character, Tempest, or Tempe, is the lone survivor of her family. Her parents died a few years ago, and then her sister has recently passed away as well, I think in the last 12 months. And Tempe's job is to dive down to the ruins of the old world and see if she can collect any relics and then bring them up and sell them. And she's doing this to raise enough money in order to be able to raise her sister's soul for 24 hours. So in this world, if you're passed away and your body is preserved quick enough, you can actually have an extra 24 hours with that loved one and say your goodbyes, essentially. But Tempe wants to raise her sister not to have her final goodbyes, but to find out about the secret that her sister has that has to do with her parents' death. And of course, when she is able to awaken her sister, things don't quite go to plan, and then everything goes from there. We have dual perspectives in this. You have Tempe and you have Law. Honestly, I was more engaged in Law's story than I was in Tempe's story. I found her to be quite almost annoying. Like, it's fine, it's a young adult book, and it felt like a young adult book, and I think I've got to be pretty careful in how I pick things from now on. The world itself I was really engaged in. I was really curious. I wanted to know more about, why everything happened the way that it happened. But we spent a lot of time on Tempe's relationship with her sister, and while normally I would be all for that, I just felt like it got a little bit repetitive. I love the world, I love the concept, I love the idea, and I loved Law. I think I preferred Four Dead Queens to The Vanishing Deep, but that's just my personal preference. Then I read Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. This is obviously a graphic novel. It is a 2020 release from Hodder, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars because it is just utterly adorable and heartwarming, and it just was a nice way to spend a couple of hours on the couch and forget about the world and all the craziness going on outside. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, this is a bind-up of Alice Oseman's online webcomic, so you can actually read it for free online, but I started reading it in the graphic novel, so I just wait for the next volume to come out and then I continue the story. It follows Nick and Charlie, who are two boys who, one of whom is gay, so Charlie is gay, Nick is bisexual, and they have started a relationship, and in this book they decide to share their relationship status with their friends and family, and this obviously has varying responses from different people involved. Nick and Charlie and a lot of their friends end up going on a school trip to France, and that was also delightful to see them out of context and to see how they deal with their own relationship and also their friends while not at home, and I enjoyed it. It was good fun. Finally, I read Grave Witch by Kalina Price. This book was actually sent to me as part of the Valentine's Cupid book exchange, and for the longest time I didn't know who had sent it to me, but because I read it and I shared it on social media last night, Sandra let me know that she was the one who recommended it to me and sent it to me, so thank you very much, Sandra. I very much appreciate it because I really did enjoy it. This is book 1 in the Alex Craft series, and this one was published in 2010 by Rock, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is an urban fantasy novel series. In this book we follow Alex Craft, who is a grave witch, and that means that she is a human with the ability to raise the memories of the dead. So at the beginning of this book she does this to help loved ones find closure or to find information, and we also find out that for the very first time she's being called in to the courts to raise the victim and have the victim provide testimony at their own trial, and it's a brand new thing. It's never been done before, and that's sort of a subplot that happens in the first couple of chapters. We also learn that since childhood Alex has been in contact with death, and the opening line of this book is great. I'm actually going to read it because it is one of the openings of a book that I just went, I really want to continue reading this now. So it says, "The first time I encountered death, I hurled my mother's medical chart at him. As far as impressions went, I blew it, but I was 5 at the time, so he eventually forgave me." So she is one of the very few people who can see death, and he's followed her through her whole childhood and into adulthood, and the two have sort of this very grudging, respectful relationship, and when someone attempts to kill her, he actually saves her, and this causes some complications. She begins investigating a very high-profile murder case, and while on the case she has to team up with Fallon, who is a mysterious detective who doesn't seem to like her very much, but is the lead detective on the case. And so they work together to try and solve the mystery, and then we find out all the different elements that make up this world as we go along. So in this world there are fae, and there are magical humans and the non-magical humans. I don't know if there's any other magical creatures through this series, but there weren't in this particular book, so we will just have to wait and see. But I was very, very intrigued by this first story. I want to keep reading it because it was just good fun. So thank you very much, Sandra, for recommending this to me. I loved it. So those are the physical books that I read this week. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on reading them in the future. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.